Greetings all, I am AnimeOtakuDrew. So, I'm uploading this video on October 28th, 2023, exactly 6 months after the release of Star Wars Jedi Survivor. As anyone who watched my Twitch stream earlier this year is aware, I did my first complete playthrough of Survivor as soon as I received both the game and my PS5. Sadly, those streams are not archived on my gaming channel, as there were some problems with the uploads and the videos themselves. Apologies. I also would like to take a brief aside to apologize for not streaming since I completed that playthrough, as my room has neither air conditioning nor proper insulation. I am entirely beholden to the weather, which has just been far too hot since my last stream for me to be out here long enough to do any streaming. Okay, now, since completing that first playthrough, I have replayed both Fallen Order and Survivor on my brother's PS5 in the main house. I collected all trophies, found all the hidden goodies, and as I played through the games again, I've had several thoughts about features and story beats that would really improve the games, as well as what I think lies ahead for Cal and the others in Jedi III. Now, the first thing that I think EA and Respawn need to do to make Jedi III a superior game is to make sure the game can function properly at release. If any of you watched the first part of my stream, you might have noticed that I encountered a problem just a couple hours into the game where another character was supposed to activate something that Cal wasn't able to reach. But after interacting with the character, that character just stayed in place, and I wasn't able to interact with them again, just leaving me stuck. I finally had to restart from my last save and replay some 15 to 20 minutes of the game to reach that point again. Fortunately, the proper course of events did occur that second time. But still. In addition to that, I've heard many complaints about the bounty system not functioning properly, which I saw myself when my brother did his first playthrough. And I even had a little bit of experience with that on my own first playthrough, as the final bounty would never appear. Now, that one was finally fixed in a patch, but the fact remains that it was broken for at least a month after the launch of the game. I've heard about other issues, but I'm not sure what they were. I just heard about a lot of people having all sorts of problems. But those were the only problems that I personally encountered or were encountered by anyone I know directly. So those are the only ones I can really speak of. Now, I can't speak for you or for any other gamers out there, but I know that at least my brother and I, who have discussed the matter at length, would rather wait a few extra months for a game that functions the way it's supposed to from day one, as opposed to getting an earlier release of a game that is so full of bugs and glitches that it hinders the ability to play and enjoy it. I don't know. What do y'all think? Tell me down in the comments. Would you rather wait a few extra months and have a game that works? Or would you rather get an earlier release of a game that, whether it works or not, is a flip of the coin? Tell me. Another thing that I think would really add to the game would be setting it up so it can recognize if you have save data from Fallen Order and or Survivor, and give you rewards if you do. Perhaps it could let you carry over cosmetic upgrades you got in the previous games. Hairstyles, outfits, lightsaber and blaster parts, and so on. Maybe even let you carry over stims or perks. At the very least, have it give you a special outfit for having the save data from previous games. You can pop up a thing saying, you have save data from Jedi Fallen Order. Reward, poncho. I think Cameron Monaghan would approve.
We have an issue here. You're talking about the story, gameplay, characters, but you haven't mentioned a poncho. Can you confirm here today, will there be a poncho in the game? It's in my contract. I would only agree to be in the second game if there was a poncho. Poncho. It's mostly poncho. It's 99% poncho. I mean, I'm not going to leave the stage until we find out whether or not there's a poncho. Well, blink once if there's a poncho. Blink once if there's a poncho. Well, first thing I notice is he's not wearing a poncho.
Cameron!
And not a single poncho on any of them.
There's a poncho! There's a poncho! Yeah!
And the one thing I also want to say to people is, you know, maybe try to find a poncho?
Also, how about making the outfits actually do something? I can't help but think of Guardian Tales, which I've been playing for almost a year now on my Switch, where the player can collect a couple hundred different costumes between the 80 plus characters, and even in a simple game like that, some of those costumes can actually do things. Some don't accomplish anything more than getting an interesting reaction from other characters, but there are certain outfits that will open up areas that you can't reach any other way. For example, in one of the levels in the first world, there's a character blocking a side path. If you talk to that character, they say that they made a promise to the Blue Knight not to let anyone in. Well, if you return with your knight character wearing the Blue Knight costume and speak to that character again, they will move out of the way and let you in so you can obtain the items beyond. At a bare minimum, I would like to see characters react differently to Cal if he's wearing something. Maybe if he's wearing something ridiculous or something like an Imperial uniform. But I would especially love it if disguises could let me gain access to special areas I couldn't otherwise visit. Kind of like the way Lando was disguised as a guard in Jabba's palace on Return of the Jedi. I want to explore Jabba's palace. Sure, there was a whole part of the story in Survivor where Cal was disguised as an ISB officer while moving around the base, but even with that, there are a couple problems. First, it's a regular part of the main story that you have to go through. So it's not a special outfit you have to find that gives you access to any special side area, but rather just something you get as a normal part of the story that simply allows you to continue the story. Second, once you complete that part of the story, you can't even use that outfit anymore. You can't go walk around Kobo and see the reactions of other characters. You can't use it to sneak into any other Imperial installations or anything else. Another thing that I would love to see is the addition of underwater combat. I can't help but think back to the Nintendo 64 game Shadows of the Empire. One of my favorite fights on there was the underwater battle with the Dianoga. It was just a really fun fight. I want something like that in the Jedi series. Fallen Order gave us a little bit of underwater exploration, and Survivor built on that quite nicely, allowing us to explore hidden areas and find some shortcuts. However, as I'm sure any of you who have played it have noticed, all of those underwater areas tend to get a little boring, as there's nothing to do but swim. Now, imagine if there were some basic enemies to challenge you while you're exploring those underwater areas. Add to that a fun battle with a hidden boss. Maybe even make it the Dianoga as a nod to both Shadows and the original film. I mean, hell, we could even have Cal end up on board the Death Star during its construction and fight the same Dianoga that is later going to drag Luke down underwater in the trash compactor. Obviously, he wouldn't kill it, but there are all sorts of possibilities. I mean, on A New Hope, that thing burned off as soon as the trash compactor was starting up, so that could be how the fight ends on the game as well. It doesn't have to be the same Dianoga, but you see my point though. The underwater fighting mechanic would absolutely improve the game. Now, these are by no means the only things that need to happen with Jedi 3. However, before I go into the rest of it, I feel compelled to issue a standard spoiler warning. As I will be discussing possible story elements for the third game, I'm certainly going to be addressing developments from both Fallen Order and Survivor, especially Survivor. So, if you have not yet completed the story on either or both of those games, then I recommend you add this video to your watch later list and then go finish the games. They're fun anyways. Awesome games. So, go have fun, play the games, beat the games, then come back and watch the rest of this video. With that said, I'll give a few seconds for those who do not want the spoilers to click away. Okay, now that it's just those of us who are unconcerned with spoilers, let's get down to the meat and potatoes of it, the story. I loved the story of both Fallen Order and Survivor, and I expect the story for Jedi 3 to continue to be just as gripping. Survivor introduced us to the High Republic characters of Dagan Gera and Centauri Khri, who it ends up was the engineer behind the High Republic facilities you find throughout the game. But as much development as we got for Dagan, we got surprisingly little for Centauri. The information we got through Cal's visions of them seemed to imply they might have been romantically involved, and that Centauri would continue working toward some mutual goal they had after leaving Dagan in the Bacta chamber on Kobo. But we never got any confirmation of their relationship, nor did we hear anything of it all of what Centauri went on to do after shoving Dagan in the Bacta tank. We don't know what their mutual shared goals were. We just don't know enough, particularly about Centauri Khri. This is something that I feel is essential for Jedi 3 to explore. As we explore new worlds, and further explore Tanalorr, we need to find other installations left behind by Centauri, and we need to learn more of what she went on to do following the events we saw in Cal's visions from Survivor. Now, there are 3 ways that Jedi III could explore this. First would be to have Cal actually find Centauri Kree hidden away in pretty much the same way Dagan was in Survivor. Then she could directly explain, both to Cal and the player, what happened after the events we know. However, while this is an option, I don't think it's a good one. We just had essentially this happen in Survivor. Cal finds mysterious figure in Bacta tank from High Republic. Cal opens Bacta tank. High Republic character comes out. I'm from the High Republic. Who are you? What happened? Oh, I'm a Jedi. Jedi Order is gone. Oh, damn, that sucks. Well, I'm going to do my thing, and you're in my way. No. So, I feel like rehashing a variation of the same events is not a great start to an epic third game in a trilogy. Now, the second possibility is for Cal to learn about Centauri's post-Dagon life from visions and Force echoes, much like he did in Survivor. There definitely needs to be some of this for the player to find, but I don't think this should be the only method of exposition for this part of the story. The third option would be to introduce a character who is aware of those details other than Centauri herself. My thinking would be to reveal at some point in the game that Centauri had a child with Dagan, him being unaware of her pregnancy at the time he got shut into the Bacta tank, and she gave birth after leaving him there. As I understand it, certain High Republic novels and comics give the impression that the Jedi Order was far more lax with regards to the Jedi being involved romantically, but at the same time, considering how Dagan was ultimately persona non grata within the Order for his whole thing going rogue and demanding to use Tanalor to start a new order and all that, the way he was at the end there, I could still imagine Centauri feeling it necessary to hide their child away from the Order. Centauri would have explained everything about Dagan to her child, who would then have passed it down through their line. That, I think, would fit with Centauri's actions that we already know of, as she clearly expected someone to return to the forest array and awaken Dagan Gera from the Bacta tank. Since she herself never did, the reason for her not doing so being another thing that Jedi III needs to explore, it could be that her plan shifted from doing it herself to passing the information on to her child for them to do so. I actually think an interesting way to handle it would be for Cal and the others to meet this character early on in Jedi III and learn that they know a great deal about Centauri and Dagan while they're looking for other sites that Centauri has set up. The characters should initially present themselves probably as a historian or an archaeologist with the particular interest in the Jedi of the High Republic. Maybe pass themselves off as an acquaintance of Toa. This character could then tell Cal and the others about previously unknown sites for them to explore in search of information and or relics from Centauri. But over the course of these explorations, our heroes come to learn about Centauri's child and ultimately discover that the historian is her descendant and wants the information or artifacts they've been gathering for their own purposes. I think this could make for some interesting developments in the story without directly rehashing the previous game. The next part is related to both the story and the gameplay, specifically replay value. The biggest complaint I've heard about Survivor, aside from how broken it was at launch, is that it has very little replay value. Now, having now completed the story, gathered all collectibles, and gotten all trophies, I can kind of see where they're coming from on this one. It took me a little while to do all of that, but what else is there for me to do now that I have? Try to speedrun it? Play harder difficulties or use the special perks that increase the challenge? That might do it for some people, I guess. But for me, it's the story that makes the game interesting, and it's still the same game with the same story on those higher difficulty levels. The only thing those options would do for me is frustrate me about my inability to play better. I will undoubtedly replay the games in preparation for Jedi III when it's finally coming out. And I may pull it out and go through every once in a while if the mood strikes me. But there's really nothing on there compelling me to keep playing right now. So, what could EA and Respawn do to increase the replay value for Jedi III? Well, there are actually quite a few things. First and foremost, they absolutely need more worlds for us to visit and explore. Fallen Order briefly allowed us to explore Bracca, then gave us proper access to Bogano, Kashyyyk, and Dathomir, as well as short visits to the worlds where the Haxian Brood facility and the Fortress Inquisitorius were. Meanwhile, Survivor allows us to explore Coruscant, Kobo, Jeddah, the Shattered Moon, Nova Garen, and a tiny bit of Tanalorr at the end. From the way Survivor wrapped up, I rather suspect that Tanalorr will now be our base of operations in Jedi III. So we definitely need to explore more of it. In fact, that could be the impetus that kicks off the whole adventure. We know from Survivor that Centauri Khri spent time on Tanalorr along with Dagan Gera. Being the engineer that she was, doesn't it seem likely Centauri probably would have built at least a few of her meditation chambers around this planet as well? I propose that while exploring Tanalorr and or checking for dangerous flora and fauna, Cal and company discover one of these chambers that has a message from Centauri Khri that indicates she's placed similar facilities on various worlds at which she's hidden components of some device that, once assembled, will grant access to something here on Tanalorr. Maybe a secret archive, some weapon that was used in fighting the Nihil that Cal and the others think could be used against the Empire, or really anything that would make them feel it's worth the effort to find these pieces of the key or information, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing. Next, they need to hide more collectibles throughout the game. Sure, Survivor had a lot of hidden items for us to find, with the Priorite shards on Coruscant, Kobo, and Nova Garen, the ancient scrolls all over Jeddah, the data disks scattered across High Republic sites on Kobo and the Shattered Moon, as well as seed pods all around Kobo. But most of those are found during the normal course of the story, with only a few that really draw the player off the beaten path in order to find them. Also, those hidden items should be spread across all the worlds of the game. I admit that it made sense for Survivor to have the data disks located only in or near High Republic facilities, but what about the seeds? We saw some kind of flora on almost every planet we visited, the exceptions being Coruscant and Nova Garen. Yet, only the plants on Kobo had seeds? That just seems a bit odd to me. Well, they could fix that with Jedi III. Seems to me that Peely would be a good candidate for Cal and the others to bring to Tanalorr anyways, considering her past with the Empire. And she could start up a new, bigger garden there, for which Cal and the others could gather seeds from all across the galaxy. Of course, you would start with the indigenous plants right there on Tanalorr, which undoubtedly would excite Peely greatly, as these are whole new species that she's never seen before, so she could learn all about them. Then you go on to find seeds on every planet you visit throughout the game. With Kobo's proximity to Tanalorr, that's a likely place we'll go to, even if it is just a staging area to prepare refugees for the trip to Tanalorr. So we could probably collect seeds there again. But where else? Well, maybe we could go back to Kashyyyk in Jedi III and gather some of the exotic flora there. Dathomir? It had some interesting looking plants. And dangerous looking. Could we visit Tatooine and find some rare desert flora? Perhaps Alderaan? From the little we've seen of it, there seem to be a lot of beautiful flora indigenous to that world. Who knows? But the possibilities are virtually endless and all exciting. In the same vein, we definitely need better reward for finding the hidden items. Okay, the first 10 priorite shards we found got us into Doma's back room, where we got a stim upgrade. And trading data discs got us a few decent perks. And okay, even the bounty pucks got some abilities that might be useful depending on your preferred playstyle. But most of the stuff we got wasn't useful at all. Cosmetic stuff and music that had no function. And then there are the seeds. The amazing reward you got for the seeds is that once you plant enough seeds, it gives you an upgrade that lets you find more seeds. Really? How about making it so some of the plants you grow can actually be used for something? Maybe somebody wants a certain kind of flower in exchange for some information or an item that you need to get from them. Perhaps you could give or trade fruit to someone who needs it. There are all sorts of ways it could be done so the player finds it worth their time to go gather the seeds. Hell, maybe once you get all of the different seeds planted, it could give you a stem upgrade. Who knows? Oh, yeah, while I'm on the subject of the garden, they definitely need to fix the gardening system. The rewards you were given for gardening, expanding your garden and the aforementioned upgrade, were based on the variety of seeds you planted. That is, you were rewarded for planting different kinds of seeds instead of planting all the same kinds. Fine, sure, great, yeah, that makes sense. The trouble is that when you go to select the seeds to plant, there is no indication in the seed menu of which types of seeds you have already planted and which ones you have not. Instead, you have to open the garden itself first and inspect which ones you've planted there, and then go into the seed menu while remembering all of that so you can make sure to plant things you don't already have. It wouldn't be that hard to program it in a way that the seeds could be designated as either planted or unplanted in the menu so the player doesn't have to go through all of that. It's not anything huge, but it would be a nice quality of life upgrade for completionists like me and players who enjoy the gardening. They could also expand the system so Peely has different areas for planting seeds of different types. Biomes that reflect the natural habitats where the plants would grow. It felt kind of strange to me that all of the seeds were able to grow just fine together, regardless of the type of environment where they were found. You can plant seeds found in the rocky hills and mountains right next to seeds found in the swamp. Yet they both grow just fine in one flower bed, same type of soil. That's weird. To make that more believable, the new gardens on Tanalorr could have these various biomes set up with different areas that reflect swamp, desert, rocky terrain, or any other kind of environment you might encounter during the game. So yeah, clearly there are all sorts of ways the hidden items and the associated rewards could be updated to give the player more to do and to make it feel worth their time to do it. But what else could be done to keep bringing players back for more? Well, as I said earlier, the biggest thing for me is story. So maybe they could find a way to add additional stories and lore throughout or even after the main story of the game. Perhaps they could add in some more proper side quests in addition to just go collect a lot of this thing for me. Survivor had an interesting system introduced with the rumors, where various NPCs would ask you to investigate something, but there was very little of it. I would love to see a lot more added into the next game, and make them even more involved. Instead of just go to this place and check out this thing, have side quests that will take you to a series of locations as you try to fulfill the character's request, and flesh out the stories involved with those side quests. These could be worked in not only throughout the main story of the game, but also in the post-game. Hell, if they really wanted to keep people coming back to the game, they could even add updates later on that would use characters and locations that are already in the game, but have new enemies spawn there as you seek new rewards in response to new quests. And speaking of rewards, how about adding more trophies that we could earn? Survivor gave us a trophy for collecting all of the priorite shards and buying out Doma's inventory, but how about a similar trophy for getting everything with the scrolls or the data discs? And of course, one for obtaining all collectibles? In fact, there were all sorts of things throughout the game that were so challenging, to me at least, that I felt like I should have gotten an achievement just for accomplishing them. But there was nothing. Now, I most certainly do not, under no circumstances, want them to do like the Uncharted games and make a trophy for each difficulty level. It is so fulfilling when you finally get that last trophy and see 100% on there. Fallen Order was the first game that I have gotten that on. And Survivor was second when I replayed those. And I'll tell you why. Because so many other games want to make trophies that are based on multiplayer, which I don't enjoy. I want to be able to just sit and play the game myself. Unless it's a co-op story mode, more on that later. Or they'll do, like I said, with Uncharted, where there is a trophy for each consecutive difficulty level. So in order to 100% it, you have to clear every difficulty level. And I'm just not that good a player. I'm not a professional gamer. I just play games. I have fun playing games. I don't have fun playing difficulty levels that are beyond my ability to do well. That's not fun for me. So, as fulfilling as it would be to get a 100% trophy on one of the Uncharted games, it's not something I am ever going to do because I cannot do those harder difficulty levels. And I don't want to see EA and Respawn turn Jedi III into that just for the sake of having more trophies. Not when they did it right on the first two in that regard. As anyone who has watched me stream the game knows, My first playthrough was on the easiest difficulty setting, and I still struggled a little in places. I think I bumped it up to the second difficulty setting on my second playthrough, since I already knew where things were. I knew the tricks to fighting certain enemies and all that, so I figured, okay, I can give it a try on this one. But I can't recall for sure. And even knowing all the tricks and the ins and outs, I still struggled on that. So I have zero confidence in my ability to complete the highest difficulty levels. So the only thing that would be accomplished by the addition of trophies for each difficulty level would be to gatekeep that 100% trophy, so only the most skilled players are allowed to get it. Don't be Uncharted. Don't gatekeep the 100%. Of course, on the subject of updates, how about some DLC? Throughout Survivor, there were several locations that I could see places that clearly have doors, or stairs, or corridors, and just other stuff like that that really makes me want to explore. Only to learn that they're completely inaccessible. I am looking at you, devastated settlement, with all of those passages plainly visible behind impassable transparent walls. Well, updates or DLC could be released that would allow Cal and the others to obtain some key or some special ability that lets you shatter those invisible walls, or in some other way access those places so they can be explored and new items could be discovered and new lore could be discovered. And then there's the galaxy itself. I noticed very quickly in Survivor that when I accessed the map aboard the Mantis, in order to select a destination, there were several sectors on that map that it would let me highlight when I pointed at them, but nothing ever appears in those sectors. How about having some worlds that the player can explore outside of the main story? Places that the player can go explore during side quests that the main plot of the game may not ever visit. Maybe even add new worlds as DLC to give players more to do post-game. Like I said, more exploration and lore. That's exactly the kind of thing that I would love, and there is no way I am alone in that. The big thing, though, is the main story itself. What can they do to make the main story keep players coming back? Well, I've thought about this one a lot, and I actually have quite a few possibilities for solutions on this. First, and simplest, take a leaf out of the original Legend of Zelda's playbook. Just have the New Journey Plus be a second quest. Maybe the maps are a little different, things might be located in different places, perhaps even a few tweaks to the story. This could incentivize the player to at least play through one additional time. The next possibility I would suggest is Resident Evil 2. And what I mean by that, think all the way back to the PSX when RE2 first dropped. I remember I got home, opened it up, and found there were 2 discs inside the case, which I quickly discovered one was for each character's adventure. The thing was, the adventure that I started on Leon's disc didn't quite mesh with the adventure I started on Claire's disc. But wait, when I finally beat Leon's adventure, I discovered that I could take that save and play through a different adventure on Claire's disc that did mesh up perfectly with the details of the first Leon adventure. And the reverse was also true. In short, each character had 2 different versions of the adventure that they could go through, visiting most of the same locations, which means that the devs wouldn't have to go to the trouble of rendering a whole bunch of different areas for each adventure, but perhaps you go through them in a different order, or solving puzzles in a different way, stuff like that, in order to make progress. Okay, hold on. Calm down. I hear you. But Drew, Cal is the only playable character in the Jedi games. Is he, though? Think about it. We had a whole segment in Survivor where we played as Seer. Why couldn't Jedi III be set up to let the player choose between playing as Cal and playing as another character right from the beginning? Specifically Merrin, who would, of course, have her own moveset, so her playthrough would be a whole new experience for the player. And in doing so, it would open the possibility of allowing each to have their own adventure, as I just described. Having an alternate quest for each character, just like RE2, would ultimately provide the player with 4 full quests to explore. Cal 1 adventure lines up with Merrin 2 adventure, and Merrin 1 lines up with Cal 2. Just like with Resident Evil 2. If that shit could be done on PSX, you know it can be done on PS5. Furthermore, the addition of Merrin as a playable character would open the possibility of co-op play. Told you I'd get back to that. Enjoying the story, but you're not that great of a player, so you're struggling to get through some places? Let's follow the example of Halo and add a co-op story mode so you can have a buddy come join you and help. I always found that to be the most enjoyable way to play the Halo games to begin with. I suck at shooters. I really do. But I really enjoy Halo. I really enjoy Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime never had a co-op mode, sadly. So I just had to grit my teeth and push through, which was a pain in my ass. But I managed to finish at least the first 2. I still haven't finished 3. Nintendo, add co-op on Metroid Prime 3 in a remake. Come on. Anyways, so yeah, I always found that the best way to play Halo is with co-op story mode. It's just more fun when you got a buddy along for the ride. Especially if you suck at the game like me. That's the only way you're getting anywhere. Now, the next possibility builds on the same idea. It might initially seem like a step back from the RE2 concept, but hear me out. How about Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep? Think about it. In Birth by Sleep, Aqua, Terra, and Ventus each have their own unique adventure where they visit all the same worlds, though often in a different order from each other. And they might visit certain sections, smaller sections of the world that other characters don't visit. But there are definitely a lot of sections of overlap at the same time. The 3 different playthroughs frequently even show the exact same cutscene, as the stories always overlap in places. And the 3 adventures have a progression in how challenging they are, in addition to the game's difficulty setting. On Birth by Sleep, in order to get the entire story of the game, the player has to fully complete the adventures of all 3 characters. And because of the shared locations and cutscenes, this still cuts down on how much extra stuff the devs have to render, as well as the memory demands of the game. Think about it. While the final mixed version of Birth by Sleep was for PS4 or Xbox One, the original version, slightly lower quality graphics, but still the same 3 adventures, was for PSP. I see no reason the same ideas couldn't be applied on PlayStation 5. But Drew... Oh, here we go again. Who would the third character be? I would have thought that should be obvious. It's Kata, of course. She is the daughter of a pretty powerful Force user, after all. Similar to how Cal spent the story of Fallen Order remembering basic Force powers he had forgotten since closing himself off from the Force post-Order 66, Kata's adventure would follow her while she is initially mastering those powers with Cal as her teacher. In fact, it would honestly even make sense for her to be learning from both Cal and Marin. And throughout the game, she would pick up both Jedi and Night Sister abilities. If we were to continue the parallel to Birth by Sleep, Kata's adventure would obviously be the beginner quest, allowing new players to familiarize themselves with the basics that both other characters would already have at the start of their adventures. This would only give 3 full quests compared to the 4 from the previous option, but as with Birth by Sleep, they would be fully fleshed out and would add into each other, giving more of a story all around, since the RE2 format would essentially just be telling the same story twice over, with some minor changes in how things go along the way. In Birth by Sleep, Ventus sees parts of the story that you never see as Terra or Aqua. Terra sees things that neither Ventus nor Aqua ever learn about. And Aqua has parts of her story that are never encountered by Ventus or Terra. There is no reason Jedi III couldn't do the same thing. You could even use the same method as Fallen Order, where Cal gained his new abilities by having flashbacks to his training sessions. In the same way, Kata could remember training sessions she had with Cal or Marin as she encounters certain situations in the story that give her new understandings of how to apply those lessons. Altogether, it would not only give the player a reason to come back and play through the game at least 3 times, but it would give a much deeper story for all of the major characters rather than just Cal. All things said, this would actually be my preferred option for the game setup. Now, as far as story elements, there are definitely some things that we need to see. As previously mentioned, Kata, being the child of a powerful Force user, is a very large elephant in the room. So, establishing her own Force sensitivity from the beginning of the game and showing that Cal and Marin are training her would absolutely be a good thing. If you don't do that, people are going to question the whole time, well, what about her? Can she use the Force? Is she getting trained? Yada, yada, yada. And especially when you consider the possibilities it opens up for the rest of the game by doing that, yeah. Next, we absolutely need to see Cal face Darth Vader again. Now, of course, Cal briefly encountered Vader in Fallen Order, only to be summarily murdered by him if the player did anything but run like hell. But in Survivor, Cal arrived so soon after Seer was killed by Vader that he certainly had to see that black armored figure departing. I mean, Cal literally got there in time to catch Seer before her body hit the floor. Obviously, Cal can't kill Vader without disrupting the canon timeline. But there needs to be a confrontation between them. After all, Cal has been gradually letting go of various ideals held by the Jedi over the course of the last 2 games. So I could absolutely see him wanting revenge for the death of Seer. Which leads me to my next essential story point that Jedi III absolutely has to address. Cal's gradual embracing of the dark side. He already had a few questionable choices in Fallen Order and the first 2/3 of Survivor. But after Bode's betrayal and murder of Cordova, followed by the death of Seer, he pretty much gave up all pretense, even powering up his slow ability to something unambiguously called Embrace the Darkness. Cal already came quite close to losing himself to the darkness a couple times in Survivor. Jedi 3 definitely has to address it. The question is how. Now, the way I see it, there are 3 routes this could take. The first and the most obvious is for Marin and Kata to make Cal realize how his descent into darkness is affecting the people he cares about. So he turns away from the dark side once and for all. As I said, this is the obvious solution and the easiest way to keep our hero's integrity. But it's also a little bland. Second option is that the devs just keep letting Cal walk the line between light and dark without even acknowledging that an issue exists. This possibility not only conflicts with the ideals established within the Star Wars universe, but it just seems extremely lazy on the part of any devs or writers that would support this idea. Finally, there is what I think is the most interesting possibility. Cal does turn to the dark side and becomes the new Star Killer. Consider this. At the end of Cal's adventure in Jedi 3, after completing the story involving Centauri Kree or whatever, Cal receives information, possibly a tip, maybe a force vision, about the whereabouts of Darth Vader. For the final world on his adventure, you take Cal to Mustafar, where you have to find your way through Vader's fortress and finally confront him. Just like Seer, Cal will have been preparing specifically to face Vader. Remember, in Survivor, Seer told Vader that she knew she would fight him again someday, and she was training for that in particular. Cal would do the same thing. He's seen at least some of what Vader can do, and he's not going to screw around and underestimate him. He's gonna push himself to the limits, and with him skirting further and further to the dark side, he can have a real fight against Vader in Jedi 3. After a certain point in the battle, it would of course get interrupted by a cutscene where Vader probably disarms Cal and says something along the lines of, "I can feel the dark side within you. Strong, pulling you closer. Join me as my apprentice, and I can teach you to use that power." Cal could convince himself that he's joining Vader in order to find an opportunity to kill him, or in hopes of getting valuable intel on the Empire that could be used to fight them, or at the very least to protect the refugees on Tanalorr. The reasons he tells himself aren't the main issue, but rather the fact that because of the darkness already growing inside of him, Cal will accept and become Vader's secret apprentice. As I said, the new Star Killer. Of course, before going into Vader's fortress, he would have wiped his ship's logs and removed the device to keep anyone from using his ship to find Tanalorr, considering even Cal himself is unable to reach the planet without it. Now, this would round out the Jedi trilogy as the story of Cal's descent into darkness, and it sets up the possibility of a second trilogy where Marin and Kata are trying to bring him back to the light. I, for one, think this would be an exciting development that would not only make for an interesting conclusion to the Jedi trilogy, but would leave me extremely eager for whatever the next trilogy would be. Another possibility that intrigues me was just raised by the Ahsoka series. Now, spoiler warning for anyone who has yet to watch the show, you absolutely should go check it out, as it is hands down the best Star Wars since Lucasfilm was bought by the Walt Disney Company, at least in my opinion. Anyways, if you don't want to spoil a key part of the plot, then skip ahead to this timestamp. So, the main plot of the story centers around Ahsoka and Sabine Wren trying to stop Morgan Elsbeth and her 2 Force-using mercenaries from finding Thrawn after he disappeared with Ezra Bridger at the end of Rebels, some 9 years earlier, 10 years, I don't know. Years earlier. It is learned a few episodes in that Morgan is a Night Sister, and that through her Night Sister magic, she has somehow been in touch with Thrawn, who is not lost in wild space or the unknown regions as we previously thought, but is rather in a whole new galaxy. We learn from Baylan Skoll, former Jedi and one of Morgan's Force-using mercenaries, that there were legends of such a place spoken of within the Jedi Order, giving the name Peridia. Still unclear whether Peridia is the galaxy or the world. I don't know. On episode 6 of the series, in spite of the efforts to stop them, Morgan and the others reach this place. And as they're arriving, we get a massive lore dump, revealing not only that the Night Sisters of Dathomir have been to this place, but that they originally came from this place. Apparently they learned how to use the Purrgil to travel beyond not just their planet, but their galaxy, and colonized Dathomir. Now, think about how this could apply to the Jedi series. One of our main characters is Dathomiri, Merrin. If Morgan Elsbeth had learned the history of her people and knew about Peridia, perhaps Merrin heard the stories as well when she was a little girl. I mean, come on. It does sound like a pretty awesome bedtime story you'd tell to impress your kids. Did you know that we didn't originally come from here? No. Our people came from another galaxy, far away. They learned to ride giant space whales so they could explore beyond their home planet. And they ended up finding this place that they loved so much that they set up a new home here. Come on. Tell me that doesn't sound like a great bedtime story to tell your kids. I could even see this tying in with the Centauri Kree storyline. I mean, Baylan told us there were tales of Peridia within the Jedi Order. Well, Centauri Kree was a Jedi in the Order. Imagine if her and Dagon's forbidden child were discovered by someone from the Order while she's trying to hide them. The Council were given the location of Tanalorr, so they couldn't hide there. But she's heard tales of this faraway galaxy. So, while on the run, she researches Peridia and learns how to travel there. Unable to return to Kobo and awaken Dagon before she leaves because of the Jedi presence there, and also uncertain of how long it will be before she's able to return, she leaves a trail of proverbial breadcrumbs that will lead whatever person she sends back to find a way back to Peridia after they retrieve Dagon Gera. We know from the latter half of Ahsoka Season 1 that there were at least 3 members of this offshoot group of Night Sisters, and that they were awakened by Thrawn after he and Ezra had been there for a while. We also know that those 3 were familiar with Jedi, stating of Sabine that this one reeks of Jedi. Now, their experience with Jedi, of course, could be limited to Ezra, but somehow it didn't feel that way to me. It felt like they knew more about Jedi than just, oh, this kid says he is Jedi, so this is what Jedi are, and they're a pain in the ass. No, it felt like they knew more about Jedi than just this one kid there. So, in my mind, it's entirely possible that Centauri Kree and her child, along with anyone who helped them, might have established a settlement on the planet and had some run-ins with these Night Sisters. Perhaps it was they who sealed them away. So it was even necessary for Thrawn to awaken them in the first place. Or perhaps Centauri and company moved to another nearby planet or moon to avoid further problems with the Night Sisters. Of course, having heard stories of how her people originated there, Marin would feel drawn to the idea of following Centauri's footsteps all the way to Peridia in hopes of finding and connecting with more of her people. And Cal would, of course, realize that an entirely different galaxy that is, at least as far as anyone knows, nothing more than a legend at best, would be an even better hiding place from the Empire than even Tanalorr. After all, if the Nihil found their way to Tanalorr, as we saw in one of the Force visions, then the Empire would sooner or later as well. This could even be the primary quest line for Jedi III. Of course, as I discussed before, along the way they realize that the friendly historian who was helping them is actually Centauri's descendant, trying to find their own way back so they can report everything going on here in the main galaxy. Jedi Order wiped out evil Empire run by Sith, Cal killed Dagan Gera, and so on. Since Cal killed this person's ancestor, they would have no real interest in helping him and his allies, and would probably try to kill him as soon as they get what they want from him. They'd probably be a pretty strong Force user, with Jedi training passed down in their family, as well as maybe some new tricks they've learned since reaching Peridia. It would be after that when Cal gets the intel about Vader's castle on Mustafar and tells Marin that if he doesn't come back, she needs to find the last piece leading to Peridia without him and get everyone there safely. As Cal heads for Mustafar, the Kata and Marin adventures converge on the planet that has the final piece of information needed to reach Peridia. At that point, they could go two ways. Either, just as I said before, Cal becomes Vader's apprentice, but they could either have Darkside Cal show up after Marin and Kata have found the last piece so they could see what happened to him. And Marin knows she has to get Kata to safety, so they destroy Centauri's clue now that they know how to reach Peridia, and leave to go get everyone from Tanalorr so they can flee to Peridia before Cal can lead the Empire there. The other possibility is that Marin and Kata find the final clue, but one or both of them sense in the Force that something is wrong. So they go ahead and destroy the clue just in case, since they know Cal knows where it is. Then they head for Mustafar, where they knew he was going. After making their way through Vader's castle, they find Cal has submitted himself and become Vader's apprentice. Marin has Kata run, so her adventure goes into an escape sequence while Marin confronts Cal, trying to talk him back to the light. Unable to do so quickly, and knowing that she needs to get Kata out of there, she finally gives up for the moment, but swears that she will return and fulfill her promise to help Cal find himself again. She then has her own escape sequence, and the game ends with them again getting everyone from Tanalorr and departing for Peridia. Now, it could either end there with the departure, or we could have a part actually exploring Peridia, similar to the brief exploration we had of Tanalorr at the end of Survivor. The next game, which I still feel should be the start of a new trilogy, would have a bit of a time jump, start with Marin and Kata, now somewhat older, on Peridia, and in addition to the storyline with Marin and Kata trying to bring Cal back to the light, they could have something going on with the Night Sisters of Peridia. Who knows? Maybe it could end up that Marin is the one who had to seal the Night Sisters of Peridia using her own Force magic. The writers could work with Dave Filoni to make sure they aren't stepping on his toes and conflicting with any plans he has. But as long as that gets worked out, this could be a fascinating addition to the lore. Of course, there are all sorts of small things that could be tweaked for an improved experience as well. And maybe even some big things that didn't occur to me as I was writing this video. Tell you what, y'all leave your thoughts in the comments on what features or story elements you want to see in Jedi 3. If you liked my ideas or otherwise enjoyed this video, then by all means, give me that thumbs up down there and make sure to share this video with your fellow Star Wars fans or game fans. I'm hoping this will end up being seen by the developers at EA and or Respawn so they can consider these ideas. And Respawn, EA, whoever's behind all of it, just know that if you're interested, I am absolutely available to write for Jedi 3 and or any later Star Wars games y'all do, the next trilogy beyond that. I love Star Wars. Writing for Star Wars is one of my dreams. So just get in touch. Seriously though, if you enjoyed it, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel. I may not post content regularly, but when I do post, it's always something that I am really passionate about, like this. And I always put a lot of thought into the content I make. You'll never have to worry about my channel flooding your feed with a bunch of crap videos just so I have something to put up. Not sure when or what my next video will be at this point, but if there is enough interest and suggestions, maybe I could do a follow-up to this with more ideas for Jedi 3 from what y'all suggest. In the meantime, I hope to see y'all down in the comments and that you'll join me again for the next video. Catch y'all later.